Okay. Hi, everyone. I am Connie Szabo Schmucker. I'm Advocacy Director at Bicycle Garage Indy, and I'm joined by Tony Chiralis, who works at our downtown store and also teaches people how to ride bikes. And let me see if I can get back in. There we go. Okay. So tonight we're going to cover hopefully some tips on teaching other people how to ride a bike for the first time, or if you're an adult learner, these same steps work for all ages. So it works really well. I've taught people as young as 4.5 and as old as 70 years old. And I don't ask them their ages, but the woman who was 70 years old, she was here visiting from the country of India, and her son gave her bike riding lessons for her 70th birthday. And so I knew that she was 70. But other than that, and I usually get the hard cases, because if it was easy for them to learn how to ride a bike, then they wouldn't be out seeking instruction from somebody else. So, and I have a fairly good success rate, but it always depends on the student and the motivation. So what we're going to see if I can find my able to. Okay, so everybody can see this still? Okay, so everyone give me a thumbs up if you can see the screen still. Okay. Let me go back to, all right, so these are some videos of students. Let's see if this will work. So sometimes I ask people if they have some videos to send them to me so that I can share them with others. And these are some of my students that have shared videos. This is an adult student. This is on her first lesson. She went from not knowing how to ride a bike at all to pedaling within 45 minutes. So I got a nice video of her pedaling. And this kid, Michaela, came already knowing how to glide. So this was her first lesson. Because her parents had to come from a ways, I gave them some information over the phone on how to get her gliding. So then she was already balancing, and so it was pretty easy to get her pedaling in her first lesson. And then this is one of my students who
Keep going.
was
Wow.
having trouble once she got started,
Keep
not
going.
going. So that's why her mom had to
Wow.
keep going.
You got it. You got it. Go, go, go.
So it's always gratifying actually to see students, um, learn how to ride. It never gets old to have someone ride for the first time. So let's see if I can put this up too. So the last student, they're actually my poster child, used their photo in advertising for this clinic with their blessing. And I've since learned that um, that the student, bike riding is her favorite activity. She loves to do it. So it's always fun to hear. So we're going to go through, setting up for success. Riding a bike can be fun, but sometimes there's frustration and anxiety. Most of the time, most people can learn how to ride. They have to get over the fear of falling. That's probably the biggest thing. They think they're going to fall if they don't have training wheels or if they don't have the seat too low. And so we're going to go through some of the things that the steps that I use in order to get them to start gliding and balancing, and how to get a bike set up for practicing to learn that and selecting the best place to practice. We separate balancing, pedaling, and stopping. So those are 3 distinct skills. And it's best if the students have a bike that doesn't have any coaster brakes, that they have hand brakes, because that separates pedaling from braking. And the students that have learned on balance bikes are much easier to teach because they already have the hardest skill, which is balancing down. If they have learned on training wheels, we have to unlearn a bunch of things, because training wheels, although they're named training wheels, do not train somebody how to ride a bike. The students who have ridden on training wheels, they haven't learned how to balance, and also the turning is totally different. I have a number of parents who say, yeah, my kid loved to ride a bike when they were on training wheels, and we took the training wheels off because they're getting older, and now they don't want to ride a bike anymore. And it's because the bike feels totally different when you don't have training wheels versus training wheels. The turning is different, balancing obviously is different. And so getting them secure on gliding and balancing first. If you can start them with what's called a strider bike or a balance bike, and then transition to a pedal bike, that's actually much better and a lot easier. Let's see. So, and there's a couple tips on how to respond to when they starting to get frustrated. So talk a little bit about balance for younger kids. If they outgrow a balance bike and they're not quite ready for a pedal bike that's got handbrakes, because those start getting, when it's a 20-inch bike, kids' bikes are sized by wheel size, not frame size. When you get into adult sizes of bikes, they're sized by frame size, but kids' bikes are sized by wheel size. So, the littlest bikes are like 12-inch diameter, and then you get 16-inch and 20-inch. Sometimes there's 18-inch, and then 24 is the largest kids' bike, and then you start getting into small adult sizes. So, if you have younger kids and they've kind of outgrown the strider bike, but they're not quite ready for the 20-inch, you could use a tricycle to learn the pedaling. It doesn't take away from the balance, but you want to try not to spend too much time on a tricycle, and you can potentially, once they get up to where they can have handbrakes, and there are bike manufacturers that do have handbrakes on smaller size bikes as well. So you can look at that. And anytime you have a question, just feel free to pop in. Let's see. All right, so there's a Learn to Ride video that I'm going to play. See if I can find my tab up here. go there.
As a kid, nothing is more exciting than first learning to ride a bike. While many of us learn to ride with training wheels, we've found the balance first method more effective for both the student and the teacher. This means children learn to balance before pedaling. Balance bikes are great for younger riders to start off on, but they're typically only available in smaller sizes. However, there's an easy workaround if your child has outgrown available balance bike options. As a temporary measure, the pedals can be removed to start the learning process. Just be aware that the cranks will still be there and could possibly hit the rider's legs. It's best to have a wide-open, smoothly paved, flat area with no obstacles in the way, such as this park trail. Ideally, the learning area has some shade. In this video, we'll be learning to ride on a lightweight, single-speed kids bike. This bike has 2 rim brakes instead of a coaster brake. Before getting started, it's important to make sure you have the right size bike. There should be a few inches clearance between the inseam of the rider and the top tube of the frame. Be sure to adjust the saddle so the child can be seated, feet flat on the ground, knees slightly bent. Having a wider stance will help the child avoid the cranks. As mentioned earlier, with the balance first method, we recommend removing the pedals at first. When using a pedal wrench to remove them, remember that the left pedal is counter-threaded, so it will untwist the opposite direction. It's best to orient the cranks horizontally. Instruct the rider to use a wide stance to avoid the cranks. You'll also want to ensure the tires are inflated properly. Next up, helmets. Helmets are crucial for young children and need to be properly fitted. Helmets should sit level on the forehead, with a few finger widths between helmet and eyebrows. Helmet straps should form a V around each ear, and the chin strap should be snug, but not too tight. With our bike and helmet ready, we'll just need one more thing before we begin: a good attitude. At this early stage of learning to ride, we can lower the seat even further to allow both feet to comfortably rest on the ground. In order to instill confidence, it helps to teach braking before we start pedaling. We advise teaching your rider to use their handbrakes primarily, even if they have foot brakes. Explain that the right brake lever engages the rear brake, and the left brake lever engages the front brake. Teach the importance of using both brakes at once, and never squeeze the left brake lever by itself. With the seat lowered and with a wide stance, have the rider walk forward in small steps with their full weight on the seat. Either let them walk the bike by pushing with alternate feet or row the bike by pushing both feet at the same time. When walking the bike, make sure they keep their eyes up, look forward, and focus on what's ahead. Before we get rolling any faster than this, we are going to practice braking again. Once our student feels confident walking their bike, we're ready to level up to gliding. To teach this next skill, demonstrate giving a big push and then lifting up your feet. Provide encouragement, be patient, and celebrate small successes as they build momentum during this stage. Once they can glide at least 30 feet without touching down, we're ready to move on. Now, in anticipation of installing the pedals, we'll want to raise the seat about an inch. We'll start with one pedal on the bike and help the student practice pushing off with pedals. For now, let's just install the right pedal. The easiest way to get started using pedals is called the power pedal position. This is where the crank arm is roughly parallel to the down tube at about the 2 o'clock position. This gives the best leverage to boost off from a standstill. To get in position, first you'll lean the bike slightly to the left and put all your weight on that left foot. Then rotate the right pedal to a higher position. Next, have the child place their right foot on the right pedal. Lastly, instruct the student to push down on the right pedal. Remind them to look straight ahead as they glide forward. We're ready to install the left pedal. Once again, we'll use the power pedal position, this time with both pedals on the bike. Remind them to keep looking ahead as they set out. First, they'll get a good boost of speed from their push-off with their right foot in the power pedal position. Next, they'll find the left pedal and start pedaling. Before they get too carried away in this moment of excitement, have the rider plan to brake and check back in. After a few repetitions to build muscle memory, they're off and away. High fives are in order after this milestone. Next up on our skills checklist, we'll master the art of dismounting. Once the bike is brought to a stop with the handbrakes, the rider needs to touch down. Lean the bike slightly to the left, then swing the right leg over the rear wheel, so the rider ends up on the non-drive side of the bike. Getting in the habit of using the kickstand after dismounting is a good habit for young riders. Once again, we recommend practicing this until it feels consistent and comfortable. We're now ready to master the final important skill, turning. It helps to set up a course for your student to get some repetition doing the same turns. Small orange cones or tennis balls cut in half both work great here. At first, you can lay out the course with gentle turns, then gradually tighten the turning angle. When practicing sharp turns, teach your student to brake before the turn. Lean slightly in the direction they're going. Keep the inside pedal up. Glide through the sharpest part, then resume pedaling once they're done turning. As always, remind your rider to continue looking up and ahead at where they're going, especially when changing directions. Like all skills, practice makes perfect. Congratulations! You have taught your student the foundational skills they'll need to start exploring the world on two wheels. We wish you many miles of smiles ahead.
Okay, I'll go back to there's also a learn to ride pager, one pager, which I'll send as a PDF, along with the slides for this that you can look at, which is kind of a reminder. That was overall, in a snapshot, the steps that I use. I have a couple of extra steps in between. Some of those bigger steps that they outlined, as well as some tips for being able to balance for a long time. Let's see. So seat position for learning how to ride a bike, you want to have their feet really flat on the ground with a little bit of bend. So sometimes I use a bike that is slightly smaller so that the student can easily push off because they're using their feet to get momentum. I also use a big parking lot. Found that if they have a big wide open space, like a big parking lot, and there's a slight downhill, that helps them get the momentum, and it also helps them not have to worry about staying within the boundaries of a path. You want to have a just a area that doesn't have any traffic at all, like an empty parking lot works really well. And then look for the drains, because that's a slight downhill towards the drains, and that's where you want to head. So like I said, setting up the bike, it's helpful to take the pedals off. If you can't get the pedals off, you can always bring them to a shop and we can take the pedals off for you. It's important, if you do take the pedals off, to understand that the left pedal, it loosens to the right instead of to the left, so it's the opposite threading. And I usually tell my students when we take the pedals off that they have to earn their pedals. So it's a big milestone, and it's an incentive to be able to get the first pedal on and then the second pedal on. They should wear tennis shoes and comfortable clothing. You don't want to have anything that's really flowing that might get into the chain. And tennis shoes or athletic shoes work really well for traction, because they need to use those to push off. So look for a quiet parking lot for your location. And then the bike ideally should have hand brakes and not coaster brakes. Let's see. So braking with hand brakes. So I don't even have them sit on the bike initially. I have them walk the bike, and I ask them which wheel does this brake stop and which wheel does that brake stop. Some bikes only have one hand brake, and it's usually the rear wheel. But if they don't know, I have them follow the brake line all the way to where, or look for, I'll squeeze the brake and have them look what is actually moving on the bike so that they know which one. And I always say right rear 2 R's, and that's the brake that you want to use most of the time. And then left is for the front, and you only use the front brake with the rear brake. And then I ask them why. And even young students understand this and have come up with the answer, the correct answer. And the reason why is if you stop the front wheel and nothing else stops, the rear wheel may lift off the ground, and you don't really want that. So, but the front brake is a very strong brake. And so when they're walking, I have them just use the rear brake first. We go, out to the end of the parking lot doing that, and I'll say brake, and they'll brake with the rear brake. And then when we're coming back, I have them do both brakes, and they understand that, yeah, that is a lot stronger brake. So let's see, next one. Okay, so the other thing that I do is getting on and off the bike. In bike riding lessons, we get on and off the bike a lot. When you go for a bike ride, you get on the bike, you ride wherever you're going, and you get off the bike when you get there. But in bike riding lessons, we're going downhill or slightly downhill, trying to glide, and then we get off the bike, and then we walk it back. And so there's a lot of getting on and off the bike. And so I tell them to put both hands on the handlebars, squeeze the brakes so the bike doesn't move, and make sure it's nice and stable and nice and straight, and then swing your leg over the back of the bike and end up standing in front of the seat. And that's how you should get on the bike, even after you've learned how to ride a bike. So you want to swing the leg that's closest to the bike over the back of the seat and the rear tire, and end up standing in front of the seat. And to get off the bike, you make sure you're in front of the seat, and then you stand in front of the seat, make sure the bike is stable, take your time. A lot of times people will stop, and as soon as they've stopped the bike, they swing their leg over, and I try and tell them, no, you can take your time. So with both brakes on, and you swing one leg over the seat, so then you end up with both legs on the same side. And then we go into coasting or gliding. I used to call it coasting, and now I call it gliding, because coasting is when you're not pedaling, but your feet are still on the pedals. Once they learned how to pedal and I'd go, coast, they would take their feet off the pedals. And no, you don't have to take your feet off the pedals, you just need to stop pedaling. So I differentiate gliding and coasting because of that. So what you want to do is have them look forward. And prior to them actually doing this, I say, I want to show you something. So you have them look at the top of the bike and lean the bike slightly to the right. And then if you turn the handlebars, so the wheel goes slightly to the right, the bike will straighten up. And I ask them, well, what happened? And most of them will understand that the bike actually straightened when you do a slight adjustment with the handlebars. And then you lean it to the left in the opposite direction, and you turn the handlebars in the direction that the bike is leaning. And when you do that, the bike straightens up. And that way they don't have to lean one side or lean the other just to counterbalance what they think is happening with the bike. They can use the front wheel in order to re-straighten the bike. And what that does is it straightens the whole bike, not just where they're leaning. The other thing is that you have to have enough speed. And that's where the fear factor comes in, because if somebody is really, really fearful of falling, they think if they go really slow, then they won't fall. And the problem is, if you go really slow, you probably will fall. So momentum and speed is your friend. Sometimes I have to get students to do like 2 or 3 and sometimes 4 pushes to get enough momentum so that they can actually glide. So they, once we, go over how you would actually balance, I actually have them turn the handlebars then. When I lean it to the right, I have them turn the handlebars in the direction it should go, and vice versa. That gives them a little bit of confidence to be in control of the bike. Then I have them sit on the bike, and I tell them, we have the seat low so that you can put your feet down. When you start going and it starts getting a little wobbly, then what you do is you just put on the brakes, you squeeze the brakes, you stop the bike, and then you put your feet down. You don't want to put your feet down when the bike's still moving. You want to make sure that the bike is stopped. And so they usually feel a little bit more confident that they're in control of the bike. They know how to stop it. They know what to do if it's leaning a little bit one way or the other, which it will if you're going slow. So once they can do that, and they push off with their feet, and we go at least 5 feet and then 10 feet and then 20, you want to work up to at least 40 feet of coasting without feet down, and then have controlled stops. Once they can do that, and you want to have little milestones, let's go this far. Let's see if you can go a little bit farther. To give them incentives. This is the hardest part of learning how to ride a bike, is learning how to balance. And sometimes it takes people a long time. And I tell them, once you get this, everything else is easy. Easier. I used to say easy, but it's easier. There's still skills involved, but once you get balancing down, and sometimes it takes a while to do that. If I have a student for, their first lesson, I usually tell people to do, come schedule a half hour. If it's going well, we might go to 45 minutes. If they don't have gliding down within that half hour, then it's time to go home and work on it. They usually have enough to know whether they had a good push or kind of what it feels like and what they need to work on. But after a half hour, if they're not making a lot of progress, you just start getting diminishing returns. So it's just better to come back the next day. And I tell people then, work on this, every day for about 15 or 20 minutes, and then come back, the next week, and we'll continue from there. So adding the first pedal. So once the student is coasting and gliding with one push really consistently, then it's time to add a pedal. This is a major milestone. Make a big deal about it. I actually have a checklist where we go through, and a good portion of the checklist is before the first pedal. And I'll have to share that. I'll share that and send that out to people. But it's also on the web page that you can download. So if a child is, if the rider is right-handed, I add the right pedal, their dominant foot. If they're left-handed, I add the left pedal for left-handed riders. That's their starting pedal. So they start the same way they have. And then once they have a good glide going, we have the pedal in the 6 o'clock straight down position. Once they have a good glide going, then you have them find the pedal with their foot. You don't want them looking down. You want them to find it with their foot. Sometimes I'll practice that before they even start gliding with the pedal. I'll hold the bike and they're on the bike and they look up at me and then they have to find the pedal with their foot without looking down. So once they have a good coast going, they just rest their foot on the pedal. And then when they come to a stop, they just put their feet down. If they don't have a good coast, then they don't put their foot on the pedal. But I always tell them you have to do something 3 times in a row. Because your brain, and actually really should be 5 times in a row, but 3 times in a row, your brain starts paying attention. If you do something one way and then do it another way and do it a third way, and then you go back to the right way, your brain doesn't know which one to pay attention to. So it doesn't pay attention to any of them. If you do something 3 times in a row, it starts building connections in the brain. And I had one of my students say, "Oh, we're training our brain." I'm like, yes, that's exactly right. You're training your brain. So I have them do, even if they have a really good glide going, I have them do it at least 3 times in a row. And then we build on all of that after that. So we do the glide, we do, and then that's also a milestone. Yes, that's number 1. That's number 2. We're going for number 3 now. It's, good incentive to get them to continue focusing on the new skill that's built on the previous skill. Power pedal position, they talked about that in the video. So you line up the crank and the pedal with this down tube. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but hopefully you can. So this bottom green line is the down tube, and you want to line the crank up with that. So it's not straight up, it's about 2 o'clock on the right side or 10 o'clock on the left side. So once they can rest their foot on the pedal, now we're ready to actually start with the foot on the pedal itself. So you put it in the power pedal position and you have the rider sit on the seat. They need to place all of their weight on the non-pedal foot on the ground, and then they place their other foot on the pedal. So weight on the right foot, on the ground, and left foot on the pedal if they're left-handers, and vice versa if they're right-handers. And then when they push off, now they're going to push off the ground with the foot on the pedal, like foot on the ground like they have been to push off, but they're also pushing down on the pedal at the same time. Once the pedal gets straight down, then they just keep it there and they glide as long as they can. So that's going to be their stopping position for future reference as well. So their starting foot is down, on the pedal, but down when they're gliding. If the bike has gears, it's really important that it's in a good gear for starting. You don't want to have it be too easy or too hard. It's got to be the Goldilocks gear, just enough to give them enough momentum, but not so hard that they have to really push to get going. So once they can do that, and they've done it 3 times in a row at least, then you add the second pedal. So this is also a major milestone and a big deal, make a big deal. We've earned our second pedal. And then, so you're going to start with the starting foot on the pedal like you did before, but then when you're gliding and the starting pedal foot is straight down, if you have a good glide, then you raise your second foot so that it's on the second pedal, which would be high because the other one's low. Sometimes it's helpful to raise the seat at this point just a little bit so they don't have to really bend their other leg to get it up there. And then when they're stopped, so they're going to glide in that position. So their starting foot is on the pedal that's straight down, and their second foot is on the one that's straight up, and they're just gliding. When they come to a stop, then the foot that's on the higher pedal steps forward towards the front of the bike. So they end up standing in front of the seat. That's important for when the seat is at the proper height as well. I'm going to stop for a second and see. Does anybody have any questions? Any questions at this point? Okay. All right, so that's adding the second pedal. At this point, a lot of students get ahead of me and they start pedaling, which we haven't really gone over how to stop when you have both feet pedaling. So I usually have to say, try not to pedal. It's okay if you do, but try not to pedal. So ideally, when they are going to start pedaling, the starting foot would go a little bit beyond straight down so that the other foot doesn't have to come up quite so much. And so when it's pushing down, it's actually going to go forward. The reason why we don't want the pedals straight up when we're starting to pedal is because, especially if you don't have coaster brakes, but even if you do, if you pedal backwards and you have coaster brakes, it's going to stop the bike and not make it go forward. And if you don't have coaster brakes, you have a cassette or freewheel, it's going to pedal backwards and you might lose your balance that way. So you always want to have it farther forward than straight up when you're starting to push down on the pedal for forward motion. So stopping has 4 steps. And I always ask my students, when you want to come to a stop, what's the first thing you should do? And if they don't think about it that closely or that hard, they usually say, you put on the brakes. And I'm like, no, you're pedaling. And I do this as a hint. This is a hint. What's the first thing you should do when you want to come to a stop? And eventually I try my best not to give away the answer because I want them to figure it out. But the first step is you stop pedaling. And if we go by this and they haven't really gotten it, then I will tell them. They go, oh, okay. So stop pedaling. When you stop pedaling, you want to have your starting foot in its coasting position. Pedal straight down and the other foot up. So you're coasting and the bike is still moving. And then when the bike slows down a bit, then you can apply the brakes, because once you stop pedaling, it's not going to go faster. And then you can slow it down more and stop it with the brakes. Once the bike is stopped, then you step down with the non-starting foot. Whatever is up comes down. And if the bike has coaster brakes, we've gotten to this point, and they don't have handbrakes, or if it has handbrakes and coaster brakes, you want to switch this up a little bit and have them stop with their non-starting foot straight down, because that way their starting foot pedal will be really close to where it needs to be to get started again. Otherwise, they have to kind of rotate the pedals around to get them in the proper position, or be ambidextrous with their feet. I try to be really consistent that you're always starting with the same foot so that you're building muscle memory. So once they've done starting, pedaling, stopping, I usually tell them they need to practice starting and stopping like 100 times. And I literally mean 100 times. I'm not exaggerating, because you need to do it enough times that you don't have to think about all the steps. But it's really difficult to get them to practice starting and stopping, because once they're pedaling, they just want to pedal. They don't want to stop. Nobody wants to stop all the time. So it's really tricky sometimes to get them to practice that. But I tell them, you don't have to do it all at once. You can do 10 times a day. And so then once they've learned all of that, we do some other handling skills like turning. So turning is interesting because when a bike has enough momentum, it wants to go straight. And if you want to make a turn, you have to slow down first and then turn. And so then I asked them, what's the first thing you can do to slow down? And if they're remembering that the first thing they do if they want to stop is they stop pedaling, they'll say they stop pedaling. So yes, you stop pedaling first. So the bike slows down. And if it doesn't slow down enough, you can apply the brake, not to stop it, just to slow it. And if you're turning right, you want your right foot up. If you're turning left, you want your left foot up. And then once you've gone through the turn, then you want to start pedaling so that you can continue going straight. So sometimes it's easier to turn left than it is right. It depends on the parking lot that I use. Actually, the right turn is a little harder because they have a little bit more speed going through it. And, you know, if you have too much speed, you're not going to be able to turn very easily. And with adults, I say, you know, if you're going 55 miles an hour and you want to make a right turn, you're not going to be able to just zoom, go right. You have to slow down so that you can make your turn. Same thing on the bike, you're not going to be able to immediately turn if you're going really fast. So you have to slow down, coast through the turn, pedal out of it. And I set up balls for them to follow as guidelines so they can follow the balls when they're making their turns. I also go over rough roads because we have a lot of rough roads, and it's always good for them to learn how to just lift themselves up a little bit off the seat. We have some rumble strips in the parking lot that we have for people to test out bikes. And so I have them go over the rumble strips to see what it feels like. And then I have go over how you practice getting off the seat just a little bit. Doesn't have to be very much, just like this much. And you can either do it with one pedal down and the other pedal up, or you can have them evenly. And you just straighten your legs just a little bit, and then you can go back down. And so once they practice that on a smooth road, then I have them go over the rumble strips, getting off the seat to see if they can tell the difference. And nearly all of them say, yeah, I can tell, you know, yes, it makes a difference. Sometimes some kids really like the rumble strips and they just like going over them without getting off the seat. But it comes in handy if there's a rough spot in the road and you can't avoid it. I use it a billion times on every ride. And I also do some zigzag riding. So these X's are like balls where they would, if you can follow my cursor, they would go between the balls in a zigzag. And then if they are really good at that, then they go, I put the balls a little bit closer together and then they go on the outside of the ball. So they have to really turn a lot. This makes them look ahead and be able to avoid things in the road. And this held something. Okay. Because you don't always go straight either. If you're on a curvy path, you're going to have to follow the curves of the path as well. And then raising the seat. So once they have some really good bicycling skills, then we need to start raising the seat. What you want is for the leg to be slightly bent when the foot is on the pedal. So before it was slightly bent when it was flat on the ground, and the pedals, several inches above the ground. So the seat needs to come up. You want to have, and sometimes that means it needs to be a bigger bike than what they learned on, depending on the size of the student. And then this video, hopefully it will play, goes over stopping and starting with the seat at the proper height. So I'm going to play this. It'll work.
Hi everyone, Sandy here from Local Motion. Today we'll be reviewing getting on your bike, starting to pedal, and safely stopping. My video partner and avid biker Skylar is here with me to help demonstrate some techniques that will make starting and stopping a breeze. While getting on your bike might seem straightforward, it can be difficult if you have limited mobility or are uncomfortable lifting your leg over the top tube. But if you are uncomfortable getting on your bike, don't give up yet. There are some strategies you can use. You can lean your bike pretty far down to give yourself some clearance to step over. Once your leg is over, just lift your bike back up and you're on, ready to ride. Once you're on your bike, if you can't stand over the top tube with both feet flat on the ground, it's a sure sign that your bike is too big for you. While it doesn't need to be a perfect fit, you do need to be comfortable on the bike. All right, now that you're on, let's get moving. When starting to ride and get your balance on the bike, momentum is your best friend. And the best way to start with momentum is a move called the power start. Here's how the power start works. From standing, position your pedal so that it's at an angle raised above the ground. When you're ready to get moving, place your foot onto the pedal and shift your weight forward to create some momentum. From there, you can find your seat and bring your other foot to the pedal as well. And now you've got some momentum to help keep you balanced as you start to pedal. Now, let's talk about safely stopping. To stop, you'll squeeze both brakes evenly and at the same time. Squeezing only the rear brake will slow you down, but might not be enough to stop you all the way. Squeezing only the front brake might cause you to stop abruptly and pitch forward over the handlebars. As you start to slow down, make sure one pedal is at the bottom of the pedal stroke. Put your weight onto that pedal and use your other foot to step forward onto the ground. You'll end up standing over the top tube just like when you started. Make sure you are using the brakes to stop your bike rather than dragging your feet. You want to be at an almost complete stop before you put your feet down. It's good practice to move your pedal into the power start position as soon as you come to a stop. This way, you'll be ready to get moving again as soon as you need to. This is especially helpful while biking with other bikes or while biking in traffic. You'll be ready to go whenever you need to get moving. In the next video, we'll be talking about best
Okay, so hopefully you were able to hear that. And I'm going to go to the next. So I have come up with a couple of steps for getting to that point in the video. So once they're comfortable with riding, you want to gradually raise the seat. But what I usually have them do is, and the reason why, well, there's a number of reasons why you want to start with the seat at the proper height and to raise it to that point. Your leg is fully, you have greater leg extensions, you have more mobility, you're not bending your knees as much. And it also, if you're starting with one foot on the ground and one foot on the pedal and not on the seat, you're using your body weight to start, so it's actually easier to get started. It's a little tricky with the balance between that. That's why, but once you start that way, it's a lot easier to get started than being on the seat. So first, you want to practice getting off the seat when you stop. So I mentioned that earlier, whatever foot is up in the stopping position, that's the one that comes down first, and you want to step forward so that it's on the ground, not to the side. If you step forward, then the bike doesn't tilt one way or the other. It stays straight. So then I also start them on the slight downhill that we had when they were gliding. And I have them place their foot in the starting pedal in the down position and just hop along by moving their other foot that's on the ground, just kind of hopping to kind of get a little bit of momentum. They try that a couple of times, make the hops longer between each one, and then once they have enough momentum, then they slide back onto the seat and then they can start pedaling. But start gradually. Once they can do that, then the next step is to actually start gradually moving that pedal up to the starting pedal position so they feel more comfortable getting started, and then move them onto starting when it's not a slight downhill. I usually tell my students, you know, I hate to break, once they've gotten pedaling and they've done this downhill, you know, on the slight downhill, I have to break it to them and say, you know, in real life, you're not always going to start on a downhill. And so we go to another part of the parking lot that's not a downhill and have them practice getting started that way. So you have to also get ready to start after an intersection, a stop sign, stoplight. So it's always good to kick your pedal back up into that starting pedal position after you've stopped, like they said in the video. Okay, so when to stop the session. So you have to look for signs of frustration and give tons and tons of praise. There's a reason why in my checklist that the first 8 things come before even putting a pedal on. It's to give milestones. The hardest thing to learn is how to balance. And so you have to have milestones along the way so that they feel like they're making progress, because they are making progress. It just doesn't seem like a lot of progress at first. But once they've got the first pedal on, those other steps come a lot quicker. And I usually, like I said, I limit it to 30 minutes at a time unless they're progressing very well. Once they have gotten the gliding down, then it's a lot easier to get those other steps started. Sometimes, and it depends on the student, sometimes it takes a long time to get them balancing. Sometimes they get it like that. And I never know until somebody comes and I work with them, whether it's going to be, easy or not. And some, like when I have them start gliding, I do it with both feet at the same time. Sometimes for some students, it's easier for them to do one foot at a time. I try not to do that unless I absolutely have to, because they have a tendency to tip the bike from one side to the other. And I'd rather have the bike stay more stable. If you don't want to have too big of a downhill for your downhill to learn gliding, because they get too much speed. You want it to be just a really gradual, slight downhill. If you do have a big downhill, then start at the bottom of it and then work your way up the hill for longer glides. And then I've got a bunch of resources. These are also on the web page. And like I said, I'll send the slides to people. And there's some additional videos and some fun games that you can do as well, which I may have to incorporate in some of my lessons. I was looking at them. Karen, you were talking about the Dutch. There's actually a Danish Cycling Federation 20 cycling games, which looked really fun. I'd have to some of them are based on having groups of people, and I usually do lessons one-on-one. So I'm gonna have to see if there's any I can incorporate into my lessons this year. But yeah, there's all sorts of resources. And I'm gonna stop my slide sharing and see if you have any questions.
Well, this has really been helpful. First thing I'm going to do is take the training wheels off and get started. Yeah, it's you did a good job as far as working through the steps, and yeah, so I'm looking forward to it, helping the boys. I guess with my daughters, of course, I was a lot younger then, but I just stuck them on the bike and, held on to the rear fender and ran along beside them, but I can't do that anymore. So this will be
Yeah.
a lot easier.
Yeah, the great thing about this thing, and actually holding onto the seat and running behind them doesn't help them because they're not learning how to balance on their own.
Right, right.
And then when you let go and they have the momentum, they're like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
It's kind of funny because people, even parents, not grandparents, will say, well, I don't have the ability to hold on. It's like, I don't hold on to the seats. I don't hold on. I don't touch them on the bike at all.
Yeah.
They have to learn their balance on their own. And so,
Well, yes, and with my younger daughter, and she will never let me forget this, but she was on her bike and I was doing the hold the fender and run along beside her, and she took off. She was doing so well. And just as you said, it was kind of like an aha moment. She's like, oh, now what? And she went across the yard and crashed in the neighbor's rose bushes. And she was, like I said, she will never let me forget it, that she ended up in the sticker bushes and fell off the bike. So yeah, but yeah, this was very, very good, and I look forward to having the information from you so I can go back and review.
Yeah, a quick question. What ages are you teaching?
I have two grandsons. One is 5 and one is 7.
Okay. Yeah,
And
definitely they're in the able to learn age. Some folks will try and start kids as early as like 2 or 3, and they
Mhm.
just don't have the coordination to do anything more than balance sometimes. So
yeah,
that age usually they can move through the steps pretty well.
I hope so. Because like I was saying that I told Connie the biggest thing for them is that I think with the training wheels, when they start doing the leaning bit and they've fallen. And so they're afraid of falling now because of that. So,
Mhm.
and it is a problem because the training wheels are just enough off the ground that they can lean over, but then they start feeling comfortable doing that, and then they do have the falls. So I need to get the training wheels off and start working on gliding and
well,
balance.
what I tell my students is that they have to either be fearless or brave. Fearless means they're not scared of anything and they do whatever. Brave means that they're scared, but they do it anyway.
Right.
And so I ask them, which are you? Are you brave or fearless? And most of them are brave. And I tell them, well, most of my students are brave.
Mhm.
And so it's important also. I've found this even more so lately that especially if a student is a perfectionist and they don't get it the first time, they get super frustrated.
Mhm.
And you have to tell them you're learning, this is a tough skill and you need to do it enough times. And you're not going to succeed the first time. That's why you're here. You're going to have to try and try and try. Because a lot of times, if they're perfectionists or, and perfectionist and fearful together, that can play into, I can't do this, or I don't want to do this, or whatever. And so you have to be super encouraging to them and let them, now, since they've been on training wheels and they're afraid of falling, so you want to emphasize, we have the seat low so you can put your feet down so that you can,
Yeah.
and we've gone over how you brake so you can stop and then put your feet down, to make them feel comfortable about being on the bike and having it be moving and having their feet up.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you very much. Like I said, it's really been helpful and gives me more confidence in working with them. So, yeah.
Tony and I are here as well to, if you run into anything or want to have someone else. I often have parents say, we've tried, we need to have some professional come and help us.
Yeah,
Yes.
when you say take the training wheels off, I would also take the pedals off, so that they can only just focus on balance first.
Right.
They
Yeah.
make it it sounds like they're old enough that they'll understand, like, hey, we're doing this because it's a process. Like, that's one benefit over teaching toddlers is a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old can actually understand a little bit of logic. So you can explain, hey, we have to learn balance first. We're going to take the pedals off and work on balance. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think they understand that they've been in soccer and basketball and realize that, it's a process and they have to practice one thing before they can go on to the next. And yeah, so I think that, we'll have good luck doing
Yeah,
this.
good luck. Just remember that I think it's the left side pedal is reverse threaded if you're taking the pedal off. So normally it's righty tighty,
Right. Yeah.
lefty loosey. The left side pedal's reversed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I will remember that.
Okay.
Thank you again. And then Connie, you'll just email me then the slides.
Yeah, I'll email you the recording and the slides will have all of the links. And I'll also send a PDF of the Learn to Ride checklist that I use.
Right.
Because I found I was doing that because I had so many students, I couldn't keep track of them. I was doing it more for me, but I found since I did that people like going over the checklist and seeing where they are on the checklist, and it
Right.
gives motivation. Oh, what's the next step? And so that's so you can, you're able to use that as well.
Okay. Well, thanks again.
You're welcome. Thank you. Take care.
Uh-huh.